Well, welcome to our conversation surrounding the vision of Base Church and where we're headed into the future. We just came off of a big Vision Sunday. And for those of you that are listening, my name is Brandon Richardson. I'm the lead pastor at Base Church. And with me, we have Emma.
Hey.
Emma is the lead pastor alongside me at Base Church. We have Jared.
What's up, dude?
Jared, he doesn't usually sound that way, but Jared is the location pastor at our city location. Yeah. We have Nate Lambert.
Hello.
Nate's the only one that got a last name, and he is the location pastor at University District. And we have the infamous Brian Ferguson.
So excited to be a part of this conversation.
That's right. And he's our location pastor at our Bloomingdale location.
And the only one who didn't sound weird when they said something into the mic. The only normal person.
Yo.
Yeah, that's right.
He had time to be ready.
Immediately, everybody took on a personality that they don't have. And that's okay. So we're coming off of a incredible Vision Sunday.
Yeah.
And it happened only a week and a half ago during the time of this recording. And, you know, I wouldn't say there's mixed emotions. I feel mixed emotions. Right. I think the general sense in our church is a sense of excitement or like looking forward to the future with expectation.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things that we still want to clarify because you can only fit so much into a Vision Sunday. And vision takes so much work. There's so much that goes into it. And I'd be lying. Like after Vision Sunday, I actually hit like a low. It was like, you know, it's after like a big race. You put it all out in the field and it's like there's time to recover, right?
Yeah.
There's recovery time. There's kind of some cool stories that came out of that next week. But yeah, I'm just, I'm curious around the room. Like, what's your general sense of kind of how Vision Sunday was? What are the sense that you know, the locations that you lead at? How are things feeling?
I think at City, like some of the feedback, you know, it's kind of interesting. We've got 2 services there. So the 9 oftentimes is a lot of like families or people that have been around for a long time, like through the 7 or 8 years that City has been like existing as a location. So there's a higher concentration of those people there. And the 9 was like, it was like the roof was going to blow off of the building. People were so fired up. Everyone was just like, this is amazing, cheering all throughout the video. And so I think just coming out of that, nobody wanted to leave. Like I went to the door right after the 9 to say goodbye to people, and like 3 people left, and then the rest of them just stayed in the lobby and kept talking. And so I think
those 3 people weren't invited back. Right?
Yeah, I was like, don't go back.
the door. Hey, on the way out.
But for the most part, everyone was just like fired up about stuff, just talking. And then the 11. The 11 is like so different than the 9 in the sense that we do 2 translations there, Spanish and Portuguese. And then a lot of people that have joined in the last year or so, or that come for the first time, come to the 11 because it's a bit of a later time and stuff. And so in there, you have this interesting mix of people, but even in that, like so many new faces and stuff, people were like so excited and again, giving feedback throughout the video and cheering at different parts. And I think afterwards, it was more like wide-eyed, like, brains just opened up to all the things that God could do. But I didn't hear anything that was just like, yo, why are we doing so? Or what's going, like everybody was just sort of like, whoa, this is wild. Like, this is wild. Yeah. And I probably talked to like 20, 25 people that morning that came up to me afterwards and were like, how can I get involved in this thing or this thing? Or even just the normal stuff. I got to join a team. I really haven't been going to my home bay. I need to. So it was cool to just see it motivate and move people.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
In a deeper connection.
It's interesting how vision doesn't just inspire for these large things, but I notice that it reinvigorates for the day-to-day. Yeah. And that's kind of the goal of vision. It's like, yeah, if something's going to happen, let's say a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, well, we don't need people all sitting on their hands in between, but we need them just doing the daily, day in and day out stuff that actually gets us there. Brian, what about you? Like what was the temperature sense at Bloomingdale?
Oh yeah, it was cool to be in the room and listening to the vision be unfolded finally beyond just leadership. And I think that was one of the most exciting parts for me is, hey, I just want the church to hear this.
Yeah.
And now everybody's in on it. And kind of like the prophet Habakkuk said about write the vision down so the herald can run with it. And I felt like the room was ready to run. Wow. Similar to City, Jared, as you said, Bloomingdale responded with cheering throughout, excitement, and then at the end there was a standing ovation.
Crazy.
And it was
So sick.
I was kind of reading like, is this an ovation because everybody loves the vision? But I felt like no, it was more cheering God, saying, God, we believe with you, this is possible.
Yes.
And so it was just like a swell again of excitement, faith. Let's do this. Here we go, God. So it was so cool to be a part of that Sunday.
If you're like listening or just came across this video on our YouTube channel, you're probably wondering like, what is the vision if you weren't there on Vision Sunday? So you can go back, but we are going to talk about some of the components in a moment. Brian, one of the things that I loved at the end of the Bloomingdale service is you got up there and you just kind of like laid out your gift for everybody. You're like, hey, I might not be as gifted in vision as, what we just heard, but I am gifted in faith. And I'm going to run with faith because I believe what I just heard.
Yeah.
And I think, there was a standing ovation before that, but then you kind of like, in a healthy way, arrested the room, right? And brought them even further. Like you took a giant leap in that moment. And I just thought it was so cool to see your gift on display. And I would agree. I mean, it's one of the reasons I'm excited to have you part of this conversation as well, because you're so faith-filled.
Well, it's hard not to be when you read the Word and read what God's done throughout generations and history. And many times I'm stirred in my faith because I read what the people didn't do, what God postured and said, here's what I'm calling you to do. Trust me in this. Believe for this. And I'm not accusing humanity before us because we're just as human as they are. But I learned from that and said, what would it be like if we said yes to the Father right there and then?
Right.
And he didn't have to say, why are you standing here? Move.
Yeah, that's
right.
We were already taking steps and looking at him saying, is this okay? Because we believe that you're
That's
in
right.
it. And so, my faith jumps to where I believe and see God is at work in a way that only he can accomplish it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was something that came out of Vision Sunday, was like this faith building experience and kind of a piece of going, okay, we can't just rely on a few people here, to lead this forward and to make this happen. We have to rely on God. Like, this isn't just something that we can do ourselves and be like, okay, great, we figured this out. We have to rely on God, and we have to rely on one another. We all have to be part of it. We all have to step in. We all have to do our part. And I think that's what we're seeing coming out of that.
Yeah, it's very true. Nate, how is the general temperature at University District?
People were just, I think, kind of a mix of everything we've already talked about.
Yeah.
Like, so excited and fired up for it. And then also just so deer in the headlights, blown away by it. It's so interesting because there was a bunch of people who got to put some of the stuff we were sharing on their hearts before they ever heard any of this. Like, groups of people have been going and evangelizing in Guelph because they're like, I think we're just supposed to be here and share faith with people here. And then they're hearing the vision like, oh my gosh, like, God is real. This is happening, which is so cool to see. And I was in a meeting this week with one guy who he was like, yeah, it's so cool. We're just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall to see what sticks. And we're like, no, man, like we're going to, I think God's going to do all this stuff. Yeah. But I think it speaks to this idea that the audacity of what God has placed on our church is incredible. And we've made one of our values that like we want to do things that like we can't do without the Holy Spirit. That's right. And that's the kind of vision we want to have. And it's like, okay, it's here. And I think people are both feeling that like, wow, we need God for this. And people are so excited because God is speaking to them in their part in that as well.
Yeah.
So out of all of the vision components, a bit of a rapid fire, out of all the vision components, what jumped out to you the most on Vision Sunday?
Guelph.
Well, yes.
Just slide it in there before anybody else does. Yeah.
What about Guelph?
I think just like the hunger that there is for people to be reaching that campus and to be reaching the students there.
So for those of you that are listening, again, didn't watch our Vision Sunday, we plan on in 2026 starting the launch of a new Guelph campus. That's the way we're wording it. And specifically directed to university students. And there's a lot more we need to flush out there, but
yeah. And I think there is just a real hunger in that city right now, even to the amount of people we have who are young people in Guelph or people who are going to Guelph that are traveling out to our University District location week in and week out. People in our church who just have a passion and a heart for that place. Like, there's something special about this right now.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited to see what God does in the young people in that city.
Yeah.
it's great.
So cool. I think the high rise is something that's been kicking around in my mind, you know, since we talked about it. Like you told the team about it like a long time, a couple years ago, mentioned like, what if we did something like this, and it's been stirring in your heart. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's been in my brain since that conversation, but then really like having it out there now, it's like, oh, this is really going to happen. And it just feels like such a big bite to take, and like it's like, how is this possibly gonna happen? Like, we're trying to get the parking lot done at City right now, and the city is going so slow with permits and things like that, and it just feels like, how are we ever gonna get this parking lot paved, let alone build like a high rise in the middle of the city? It's just like the amount of I don't think people realize, myself included, it's like that unknown. Like, there's so many things we don't even realize, like hurdles we're gonna have to jump in order to make that happen, because it's like first time for everybody. But the cool thing is, like, God knows all of that. It's not just a financial thing. It's like a city thing and permits thing and builders thing and all this. And I'm just like, whoa, God, you're going to need to stir some hearts towards this. And I completely believe that's going to happen. Like, there's no part of my mind that's like, maybe we don't do it. It's like, we are. Just what's the timeline that God has? But it's such a big thing that I'm like, sick. I'm excited to see how my faith is built and others are built as God, like, pulls all those things together.
Yeah.
There were so many parts of the vision. Like, I could speak to the Bloomingdale parts about buying the field and expanding, getting ready, and what that location could be. But you know what lifted in my spirit was when I heard the wording you used of, we're going to pour rocket fuel on Emmanuel Bible College.
Yeah.
And I was actually surprised to hear how much. I just kind of sat up and leaned forward.
Yeah.
And because I'm a graduate of Emmanuel and watched it go through different seasons.
Yes.
And yet the vision with it now to equip and to teach leaders, pastors, people to go plant churches, go into the marketplace and share the good news of Jesus. And I just got so excited by, we're going to put rocket fuel. It reminded me of the burning bush. And Moses' moment of just a fuelless fire. Yeah. God's going to light this rocket fuel fire to do something new that's just going to keep growing and expanding.
Yeah.
And so, I was surprised, but I was so excited of who are the students, who's coming yet to be a part of what God's got in store through Emmanuel Bible College.
It's so interesting because already there's like a level of momentum that wasn't there a year ago with Emmanuel specifically. And even just last night, we had a prayer and worship night. And right afterwards, these two young women were like chasing me out of the auditorium. They're like, Pastor Brandon. I was like, what's going on? And they're like, our friend really wants to come to Emmanuel Bible College, but cool. Registration closed yesterday. Like, what can we do for her? And I was like, well, you can still apply. Didn't want to tell them that. There is roommates that got into Redeemer University where I went to school like the day before school started. Right. So, there are exceptions to the rule, but there's this real hunger and there's this desire to learn and to apply what we've learned into the marketplace and ministry. Mm-hmm. But
I think, there's so much with Vision Sunday that I'm just so excited for, but I think I'm gripped by anything that's around taking ground. Like when it comes to buying the field, breaking ground, just buying property, building, all of those pieces. I think there's just such a level of expansion that God wants to do, not for us, but for his kingdom, and just being able to be a part of that. Like, I feel like humbled and honored and excited and all of these things. And I echo what Jared said. It feels like this is so big and we don't know what we're doing, but we do know that there's going to be challenges and hurdles and things to cross, but I'm excited about that. And I think I'm also excited about all the pieces of like building this healthy local church as well. Like there's just so much in Vision Sunday that's like, hey, we're going to have the classifieds. We're going to have, make sure that we are continuing to pursue health and depth and discipleship and all of these pieces across the church. And we're pursuing one, but not forgetting the other.
Right.
In all this.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the taking ground piece sets us up with one of the predominant tools needed to do some of the other things. So the church is as much as the church scattered is as much as the church is when it is gathered. So, you don't need a building to be the church.
Right.
And the building is a helpful, useful, practical tool that moves ministry forward. Yeah. And we've even seen that at our city location where you've seen just growth because people realize, hey, this is permanent. It's going to be here. Yeah. And so taking ground leads to greater opportunities of ministry. And I think that the taking ground piece is so important in this Vision Sunday, because when you don't have room, or you see the need for growth, or maybe we could say it this way, when you're meeting in a space and you realize that the space can't contain you,
Yeah.
it's pretty obvious on everybody's minds when you go, hey, we need more, we need to get a bigger building. And everybody's like, yeah, we've been feeling that for years here, or obviously that's the next step. But when you find yourself in a building as large as Bloomingdale, it's 90,000 square feet for those of you that haven't been there. And then you find yourself in a building like City Center, it's 20,000 square feet, but we're only a year in.
Yeah.
People aren't thinking, we need to take more ground at that point.
Right.
But at the point in which we realize we need to take more ground, I mean, property's going to be more expensive.
Yeah.
It might be nearly impossible to get in a city like Waterloo.
Yeah.
Like 10 to 20 years from now, that's not the time to be thinking about these things. So this is like future planning, putting it on the hearts of people now and going, hey, this is something that we actually need to think about now.
Yeah.
It's actually something that I think is important for everybody that has watched Vision Sunday, has seen the whole thing, should be aware of, is like, we're not casting vision for all the things we're going to do in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Like when we talk about planting a church in every major municipality in Ontario as a part of the renewal of the church in Ontario, what we're not saying is we're going to do all that in the next 10 years.
Right. Yeah.
Like we need to go at the speed at which God gives us. But we believe similar. Like Abram's told to go to the land flowing with milk and honey.
Yep.
He's not given a timeline.
Yep.
He's only given a direction. And there's some significant checkpoints that he needs to cross with his family in order to get there.
Yeah.
And those checkpoints, they got to keep those in their eyesight, and then they cross that checkpoint, they go to the next checkpoint.
Yep.
And I think that God has given us a direction, our land flowing with milk and honey, so to speak. And there's some checkpoints immediately ahead of us. Hey, high rise is great, but what about just getting property to start?
Yeah.
Buying more, doing more stuff around Bloomingdale is great, but could we look into getting more property?
Yeah.
Hey, every major municipality having a church planter at a base church is great, but what about like just doing Guelph right now?
Yeah.
And as we look forward to the things that we eventually want to do over the course of decades, I think it's important to realize, like right now, the most important thing we could do is just take the next step.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, for anybody that's like, how are we going to do all this? And well, I don't think God even wants to do all this in the next year.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's the thing he wants to do.
Yeah.
But I do think he wants to do this over the course of, I don't even want to say decades, because I don't even feel like some of this stuff is so far out.
Right.
But some of it is going to be worked on for decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in that, but in that, like the thing that we've seen over and over again, at least that I have since I've been journeying with you guys, is God doing this stuff way sooner than we expect.
Yeah.
Like I remember we keep going into like leadership meetings, writing stuff on boards, being like, in 5 years, in 10 years, and it's like next year, like 2 years.
Yeah.
Like what?
True.
In a particular not volunteer, it was a leader meeting. We were in Collingwood, and we wrote down on a whiteboard, here's what we know we need our church to be a part of. And the only thing coming out of a 2-day brainstorming period, I think that we actually wrote down, is we need to be a part of education.
Yeah.
And then the big dream was, in 30 to 50 years, can you imagine we started a Bible college?
Right.
Yeah, it was like decades off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
And-
3 months later, we got a call?
I was going to say 2, but 3, that sounds good to me. We got a call, hey, do you want to buy the Bible college property?
Yeah.
And then, 4 months after that, we end up taking on leadership of that Bible college.
Yeah.
It's like,
What?
so to your point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just happens faster. God moves at his speed. And
Yes.
sometimes things happen slower.
Yeah.
Like, and on the flip side of this, like I think about this idea of like, we're going to plant more churches. And that's something that you guys have said since day one. And we're, into this, and 3 locations is amazing, but I know how much is on like our hearts as a team, your guys' hearts as leaders. And it's like, all of it is in God's timing. It's
That's
not
right.
like, are we going slower with this thing? No, we're going at the pace that God is setting. And some things are happening way faster, and some things are happening maybe slower than I thought, but that doesn't mean that God isn't just going to blow the lid off it in like
That's
a
right.
year or two anyway. So I think if we get caught on those timelines, and I can find myself doing this of like, oh, I thought this would happen then, we're spinning our wheels a little bit, and I think the bigger thing is like, it's this phrase that keeps resonating with me is like, our job is obedience, God's job is outcomes. So it's like,
Yes.
as we're faithful to the things that God has placed in our hands, he's going to move all this stuff at his pace.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like you guys have had this like kind of math equation a little bit that you've done
Yeah.
to like talk about how to think about the pace that we're going to move at.
Yes. Well, the equation comes out of a book, and I'm trying to figure out what the title of the book was, but he was actually a Bible college president in the States, grew it to one of the largest Bible colleges. And a number of years prior to writing this book, he said they got rid of their strategic plans because what they realized is they were putting out all these strategic plans and they would drive people to simply try to meet something that they wrote on paper arbitrarily in a room when they were filled with like inspiration. And he said the better thing rather than these strategic plans is they started to experience real growth and real donations and funding coming into the Bible college.
Yeah.
When rather than trying to chase these arbitrary numbers on a page, they actually just tried to create as much health in their organization as possible, as much a margin in their organization as possible, and then looked out for God assignments and opportunities in their future.
Yeah.
And then what started happening is their future started to look the way that God wanted it to look.
Yeah.
Right.
Rather than, we've got 1,000 students now, we need 2,000 by this date.
Right.
And what it does is it runs people ragged, and it's like, well, are there other components to the growth of this college that need to happen before we get another 1,000?
Yeah.
Like, should we talk about the health of the culture before we add another 1,000
Yeah.
students to this thing?
Yeah.
And so growth goals are kind of ridiculous in my opinion. It's like, do the right stuff that fosters growth and it'll come. So create health and then create margin, another outcome of health.
Yeah.
And then just wait, be patient when God brings across opportunities. And I think, for instance, it's like we've had health and margin even over this last year of the merge.
Yeah.
And the plot point of planting churches has been out in the future for a lot of us for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But the opportunity of Guelph just keeps like, it came to the point where if another person tells me about Guelph, like we're going to have to start it next week.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not this thing that was like, well, we better plant a church now because we said we're going to do it.
Yeah.
It's like enough people were saying, what about Guelph? Enough people are going there and just evangelizing, being like, I don't know why we're here. We're supposed to be here, but like it felt right to us and the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing I'd love to just kind of reflect on for a moment is also just this necessity to always get it right. So like
Right.
part of Guelph, it's like we're committed to Guelph. We're going to do it. We're not going to give up on it for a long time. And I think when Jesus sends out the 72 and he says, go reach these towns, and he send them all over Jerusalem, Judea. When he begins to do that, he says, if they don't respond, shake the dust off your feet
Right.
and walk away.
Yeah.
I think that the church has an unhealthy obsession with it has to always succeed.
Yeah.
And then if something is succeeding, we're always going to do it. And it goes along with this timeline conversation. And it's like, hey, I guarantee you in the next few decades of planting churches, some of them aren't going to work out.
Right.
Wow.
And is that a nature of a failure of leadership? Or is that a nature of sometimes when Paul says, I tried to go into Asia and
Yeah.
God kept me from it?
Yeah.
Or these disciples, I went here and our peace didn't rest on the place. And so we had to come back and shake the dust off. Like,
Yeah.
I think that we just need to be obedient to the next step and leave the outcomes, as Jared just said, to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we can run into as the church at large, not just Base Church,
Yeah.
is that we all of a sudden pick up this fear of like, if I'm not succeeding, if it's not going perfectly, if it's not the exact right time, if there's anyone that's giving feedback that maybe is saying, maybe not, then I can't go forward. Like then I
Right.
can't do that. And it actually is stunting the ability to see people come to know Jesus, because there's this fear of what if I say the wrong thing? What if I offend? What if I do the wrong thing? Specifically in the church in Canada. And I think this whole idea of like, hey, we're going to try, we're going to keep moving forward. We're going to keep stepping into it, whether it's a success in the world's eyes or not.
Right.
We're going to keep leaning into that. And I think little by little, you start taking ground instead of just staying stagnant.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important mindset that not just our church has, a lot of churches have this idea. We want to move forward and we want to keep growing with it. But I think you're right. We have to expect that not everything's going to be perfect all the time, and that's okay.
Yeah.
There's not a company out there that has a perfect track record,
No. Yeah.
right?
Right.
Even you think back to what I'm hearing it speak to is what Jesus did in just empowering and sending the disciples. Remember that conversation, and then he's going to send them out in twos. And
That's right.
And so he said, you're going to go out and you're going to heal the sick and you're going to preach the kingdom and you're going to cast out demons. And you can picture them just kind of looking, wait, we're going to do what he's doing?
Right.
We're
Yeah,
not as
that's
successful as him.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
yet what he was saying is just go.
Yeah.
Go,
Just go.
obedient, go in faith,
Yeah.
and go believing that the Father's going to accomplish this, which is what you highlighted. Watch and see where God's already at work, and let's just join him. And he's going to accomplish great things. So the whole theme that you brought out as well of it's time to move,
Yeah.
like that, that just comes throughout Scripture, and it's our turn as Base Church
Yeah.
to move.
Well, and it's like there's these big components of move. So renewal of the church in Ontario,
Yeah.
plant churches, plant Guelph, help with the pastor in residence program. There's all this stuff. Education. Let's move some staff and pour rocket fuel. Make sure this happens. Healthy local church. It's time to move and take more ground and make more room at City. Buy the field at Bloomingdale. Find property in the mind map of university students at Uni District. But then there's also the component because if we're not careful, our whole church is going to be like, well, all that sounds really good. I can just sit back and watch this all take place.
Totally.
But there's also this healthy local church component, which is like, move on your street, pray for it, right? We're going to pray over every street in Waterloo region.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we're going to pray around this region. Hey, we're going to invite this evangelistic event in the summer where we do tent revival meetings. You know, that everybody has a responsibility to move in in some way or another. You know, one of the ways that we need everybody to move is resources.
Yeah.
It's like the component of Vision Sunday that I actually appreciate. Like I used to be really nervous about this, like getting up and being like, hey, also, if any of this is going to happen, we've got to give and we got to sacrifice.
Yeah.
But I've seen the blessing of it in my own life over the last little bit. But how's that manifested itself in your own lives? Like we come to Heart for the House and it's like we're having conversations in our family. I'm sure the same way that you guys in yours. I have a number locked in my head, so we haven't had too many conversations. And Emma's like probably thinking, what is it?
I don't know.
Do you want to say our number on 3?
1, 2, 3.
Everybody's like, are they really going
I'm
to
gonna do that right now.
There you.
But, you know, we have these conversations and all of a sudden, like there are times where like a pit kind of gets in my stomach. I'm like equal giving, not equal giving, but equal sacrifice. And I think there's even some people in our church that struggle with, okay, what does equal sacrifice mean? Because, you know, there's a scale of giving in our church as well. That's quite different from one another, but it has taken real sacrifice nonetheless to get to the place where we have all found ourselves right now. Like it was real sacrifice to build onto Bloomingdale. It was real sacrifice to get that building at City Center. Yeah. And it's been real sacrifice from the whole church to keep University District running in a way that reaches students in a compelling way. Yeah. So how's this looking in your own life? And
I like this season every year because I like the way that we structure it at our house is I'll do some of the big picture, like financial stuff of where we're going, what are the things we're driving towards. And then I get so anxious about paying bills and doing the day-to-day stuff. So Beth takes care of all of that. So honestly, I don't think much about our finances like on the day-to-day throughout the year until we get to the season. And I'm like, oh man, I really got to wrap my head around like my heart posture with things. And year over year, I remember the first Heart for the House that I was a part of. It was like the year we were getting married and we had all of this money set aside for our wedding. And I called Beth and I was like, we got to give all the wedding money to Heart for the House. She was like, you're an idiot. We're not going to do that. And so then we found out like a reasonable, like, okay, this is actually what God is saying. I was just like so inspired by what was happening. And I think every year it's been just like maturing in that. I'm like, God, what are you speaking this year? And there's not a year gone by that God hasn't given us like, this is what you need to give. Mm-hmm. And so it's just been weird of like, again, it's just obedience. So back to the obedience thing, like last year, every year it's gone up as God has like increased us and as we've grown and got jobs and promotions, all these different things, like that number's increased. And then last year was the first time that like it decreased slightly, like by a small percentage than the year before. But I felt so convicted about the number. And I remember wrestling with like, God, like, I feel like you've continued to increase it, but like, why is that not increasing? And just like I got anxious about it, and I was like, I'm gonna add more on anyways. And then I got really anxious about that, and I was like, God, what is the deal? And so I was faithful in that last year, and Gabe and Beth felt good, and we felt good, and we were like, all right, like we'll just be faithful to this. And then this year, it's funny because like that was like, even though it was like marginally less than the year before, it was still a big stretch for us at the time. We didn't even have the amount of money that we did in the accounts when we like pledged it. So it's like, that's what I'm talking. Well, it's still like big faith in these things. This year, like the number that I feel God's placed on my heart, and you know, Beth and I haven't like sorted it all out yet, but I'm fairly confident is that like is more than double what last year's was. Wow. And I'm like, that, like, how is that even possible? And so I think in this like wrestling of what do we give and how do we, like, I think taking really seriously the heart posture before God to go, God, I will do whatever you ask me to do. Right. So what are you asking me to do? Like whether it is like more than I currently have, whether it is less, that whether it is like whatever you're saying. And I think the thing, we talked about this on a drive the other day about like your operating system, your motives behind things, where it's like if your motive is impure, then like that, like you're gonna really struggle finding that thing. But if your motive is like, God, I am humbly submitted, recognizing everything that I have is yours, then God is gonna lead you in that, and you just have to like have the boldness to obey whatever that thing is. And so for some years it's been, God, I'm gonna have bold faith that you're gonna provide this. Some years, last year it was, God, I'm just gonna have faith that like what feels weird and inconsequential to me is like what you're asking me to do. And in the obedience, I remember one year we gave all this stuff and we were like, yeah, this is great. We're so fired up. And then the next week we had like $7,000 worth of things break in our house, like our washing machine, our pump, like all this stuff. And I was like, God, what in, like, I don't even have the money to pay for this. What in the world? But again, God just provides. And so I think I've learned year over year. Yeah. I get anxious around this season because I'm holding on to stuff. And then as soon as my heart changes and I go, God, you've always been faithful. It's that working, that letting go. And then I'm like, oh, I'm just fired up to give now because I know that God is faithful, you know?
Yeah, there's this real reset I find in my brain during this season where I'm reminded all of this is God's.
Yeah.
All of this is God's. And the years similarly that we have sacrificed most, God has done the most in our lives.
Yeah.
And I'm hesitant to always say that because I'm like, I don't want people to think we're speaking this prosperity message of like, you give, your life's going to go really well. I've known people that have given over the past, year, and they've experienced like real heartbreak in their life.
Yeah.
And there is a component of God's blessing when you are able to release what he's given you. He's able to, I believe, trust you with more.
Yeah.
He just is.
Yeah.
And it's quite remarkable, actually.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nate.
Well, I was going to say, like, on that point, like, for Emily and I, there was this year when I first came on staff at the church, and I took a pay cut from working in tech sales to come.
I think, for context, and you wouldn't say this, I think you were taking 30% of what you were making by coming on staff.
Yeah. Yeah. That.
So a slight pay cut.
Slight pay cut.
70% pay cut.
And by the way, I think Jared did something similar.
Yeah.
Not that percent.
But you weren't as good at sales as Nate, so you weren't coming from...
You weren't making quite as much.
Jared was honestly better than me. He just wasn't there long enough to get promoted.
Yeah, there you go. So for context,
I kind of skipped the line because he left.
Both these guys came from the same company, both salesmen, and I hired both of them in a period of how long?
A couple years.
A year and a half.
I think that they stopped hiring people from our church after that.
Yeah, and so like I remember though we were taking this big pay cut. We had just bought our house.
Yeah.
I prayed to God and asked for an opportunity to make money on the side, and this opportunity that like is the kind of opportunity that doesn't exist in sales of like a part-time sales role came about. Yeah. And then I felt God being like, okay, now say no to it. And I was like, okay, that feels weird.
Wow.
Okay, just showing me you can do it, flexing, but don't do it. Yeah. So I said no to it, and we're like, how are we gonna pay for our mortgage? Yeah. And then I remember Heart for the House came up like a month after that. And it's still to the day the most we've ever given for Heart for the House was that year. And it was just this crazy thing, though, because in the midst of that and this feeling, this conviction to give, we've never had more peace in our finances than since then.
Wow.
And it's such an interesting thing because to your point of like there is this blessing component, we have objectively had less.
Yes.
Right.
We, still Emily's gotten raises. I've gotten some raises. We still aren't anywhere close to where we were at that point in our income. We've objectively had less. We've bought less. We've done less.
Right.
And we've been much more peace and felt much more blessed and been much more confident with our finances in surrendering them fully to God.
Yeah.
And so even having less, it just feels like that blessing has been so evident in our lives and what it does for our souls. And I feel like that experience is what leads like every single year where like we just get excited at this point for Heart for the House because it's like, this is something we get to do every year. We get to challenge ourselves, push ourselves and remind ourselves that this is all from God. And like, that's a piece that is way more valuable than having more stuff.
Yeah.
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 You didn't need another ping pong table in your basement.
No.
This guy was spending money like the Wolf of Wall Street. I've never watched that movie, so maybe that's not a good reference.
I wasn't doing that stuff.
There you go.
Just to tell you that.
Oh, man.
I think something that was really cool in Vision Sunday and the message shared was those roundtable conversation of people that were a part of Slate Church when it began and people that were a part of Koinonia Church when it began and them posturing with faith and believing for and that was just a really cool component within our midst of sharing the vision that I think really stirred me toward then what's this new season going to be like?
Cool.
Somebody made a comment in that roundtable conversation of, oh, my husband would have retired years ago if we didn't.
Yeah. Wow.
And then as I get a little bit older and thinking about retirement, it's a long way off. Don't worry. But I think about, I don't want to retire from being frontline with what God's doing.
Right.
I don't want to be sitting on some couch by myself somewhere.
Right.
And missing out on having faith, going into the land. We're reading in our Bible in a year reading program about Caleb. Yeah. And he was just as strong with faith and vigor. When he was 85 as when he was 40.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm like, I want to continue to believe every year of Big Give, Heart for the House, and what's God going to do? So I'm postured to. I heard this teaching as well as God will put in your hand what he can put through your hand.
Wow. Interesting.
And so I'm excited this season to go, what are you going to put in my hand that you're actually going to put toward some of this vision? And so it's some of what you guys have said of, it's a season of faith and looking to say, show me what to believe for that you're going to put through it for what you're going to accomplish. Again, for your glory, but I get to be a part of it, not retire, but fully fired and going.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to Heart for the House, I think it's a great opportunity for people, if they don't give, to start giving. Yeah. It's like, if you haven't experienced the blessing of tithing, and I have a New Testament understanding of tithing, which is, let's not limit ourselves to 10%. Let's give more than that. And on a regular basis, we don't, give much more than that. We give 11% and then we round up. You know what I mean? On the gross of what comes in. And that's just to be fully transparent on what we do. Yeah. But if you haven't experienced the blessing of it, because it could be any percentage, and I think try above 10 because the lowest we ever see in scripture is 10%. Right. But my grandfather said a long time ago, I can't afford not to give. That's right. And I've tried to emulate that. I remember bringing home $10 from cutting ditches. The old people in my neighborhood couldn't cut their ditch, so they would hire me and I'd cut their ditch. They'd give me $10. I'd come home, my dad would break that down into 2 toonies, a loonie, and a $5 bill, and he'd say, what do you do with this loonie? I'd go take it to the church that Sunday. I've never been without in my life. I've never missed a meal that I wanted to eat. I've never, in the midst of living in a 400 square foot apartment, making $1,000 a month, and having a car and a baby on the way, we were always able to put food on the table. Money would show up in our mailbox. And I just think there's a real blessing in continuous giving and regular giving. But Heart for This is this great opportunity if you haven't done that to just start giving at all. Get in right? It's not really the opportunity to save up all your giving throughout the year and just do it once. It's meant to transpire into regular giving. But if we take a look at what we see consistently throughout Scripture, there's this regular component, we give out of the first, but then there's this sacrificial offering component where it's okay, now as a family, we count the cost. Right. And we go, okay, what are we willing to give to what God's doing?
Yeah.
And I think that there's something around the Heart for the House season that's special, that it's all of us together.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not just someone
That's
who's
right.
really involved in the church. It's not just a leader. It's not
That's
just
right.
someone who maybe has a lot of income or assets or things that they can maybe use. And it's not a time for us to sit back and go, okay, everybody else can do this, or everybody, or maybe I'll just give this other piece that I have over here. I'll just give my time. I'll just,
Yeah.
Right.
when we read in scripture, it's holistic. Like
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
holistic giving. It's not just kind of, this part makes me uncomfortable, so I'll just give this part instead, and we make those trade-offs.
Right.
What we actually see, if we're going to be obedient to what God's calling us to do, is that there is sacrificial finance on the line when
Yeah.
it comes to this. And so I love with Heart for the House that it's all of us doing this. And I agree with you, Brandon. If you haven't given before,
Yeah.
it's a great time to step out and do it. There's no, you don't have to be ashamed of that. You don't have to be, feeling guilty
Yeah.
about that. But what does it look like? What is God saying to you that you can give? And if you're going, listen, there's no room. Like, what do I do? There's no room. I encourage you, talk to God about that, but also bring other people into that conversation.
Yeah.
With finances, we're often so closed doors and we're so tight-lipped on it.
Yeah.
And sometimes someone else with a fresh perspective, a different idea, wisdom around how they've
good,
stewarded
Emma.
their finances,
For sure.
looking at yours, no shame.
Yeah.
Everybody spends money.
That's right.
Everybody's got different income amounts, whatever else, to look at it and go, hey, I'm just seeing some gaps here. Maybe we can switch some ideas
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Maybe we can reorient this here
Yeah.
to be more of a good steward to what God's given us. And I think we, as a church, just need to keep letting people into that and into
Yeah.
that conversation and make
And
wise
letting
choices.
people in that aren't just good at their finances,
Yeah.
but have like a God perspective of their
Totally.
finances, because we've just told a bunch of stories that don't make sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? Like a financial planner is going to be like, what is your deal?
Right.
For
now,
sure.
there are some really good Christian financial planners that are going to get this completely.
Yeah.
But for instance, like one thing that I haven't said in a long time, but it was always our aim to be in some of the top givers of our church.
Yeah.
Personally,
Top 10.
top 10. And I mean, I'd have to take a look. Even this past year, it wouldn't be unrealistic, I think, to still think that we might be in some of the sacrifices that we've made. And we have a fairly large church. And so I just say that because I don't want to lose my blessing in heaven. But I just say that so that if there's a skeptic going, oh, these guys just want more, it's like,
Right.
no, we're in this with you.
Yeah.
And when we look, like when Maria van der Ahe said we would have been retired, that resonated on a level that I didn't realize I needed affirmation in.
Right.
Because I think about some of the things I would have loved to have done by now. We just haven't been able to do them. Some of the projects I'd love to do around our place that I don't even dream of doing because I know I'm going to have to save up for a number of more years because of the sacrifice we're going to make. And I felt seen in that moment, actually. And it's not that my retirement has been pushed out. I'm still pretty young and there's a lot to recover from and all the rest, but I don't have anything to recover from as much as, no, like over the years we've sacrificed.
Yeah.
And God has, once again, I can't not give him the glory for this, has done the biggest things in our lives during the years where we have sacrificed the most.
Yeah.
Like
So cool.
materially,
Yeah.
Yeah.
health-wise, miracles.
Yeah.
And I just don't know how to explain it. I'm not about to build a theology for our church around it. I'm just telling you what our experience has been.
Right.
And I can say to my kids, guys, I can't afford not to give.
Yeah.
I can't afford not to tithe. I can't afford not to give in Heart for the House. So,
Yeah.
it's a pretty big season for our church, and I think it's important for people listening to this that are from Base Church to just hear, like, we're all contributing to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
You know, we don't have a bunch of staff holed up in a room, praying that people will give and
Yes.
them themselves not giving. It's
Yes.
something that we do together with our church, and it's a real healthy journey to be on,
Yeah.
which is exciting. I think that's a pretty good overview of
Yeah.
Heart for the House.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Covered lots.
We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
And we didn't announce this on Heart for the House Sunday, and I don't even think we're announcing it right now, but I like this format of sharing what God's
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
And so, you might just see more of this.
Yeah.
Heart for the House is coming up on April 13th at Base Church, and we just ask that you continue to take that pledge card, pray over it. We're doing that. I have a number. We haven't talked about it. We'll talk about it. And between now and then, it's actually just about praying about what God would do, trusting the timeline to him, trusting that he's in control. And I just want to thank you guys for leading the charge with Em and I, for all that you pour out into our church. The best days are truly yet to come.
Come on.
It's time to move.